Guys, we are in live stream. Behave yourself. पिछले बने बजे दी
AI is changing the game for app development. Firebase is here to help. Firebase offers a
project. We're not just going to build something like a to-do list. We're actually going to make something that uses a real-world API, fetches data, displays data, and covers all of the important React components and features so that by the end of this video, you feel comfortable working in the framework. Now, this is not designed for complete beginners. You should have some experience with JavaScript, but this is designed to teach you React as quickly as possible by skipping over all of the stuff you really don't need to know and getting right into the important stuff and immediately applying it into a project. Now, that said, we're not going to cover the entire framework because there is a lot of stuff here, but what you'll learn in this video will cover about 90% of what you use on a day-to-day basis, give you a really solid foundation to start building React apps. Anyways, with that said, let's get into a quick demo of this application after I tell you about a great resource that you'll want to be aware of. So if you're anything like me, you probably like writing code and building apps, but you don't like designing them, especially when you're using CSS. Now, fortunately, in today's age, we don't need to write that much CSS ourselves, and that's because we can take advantage of great free resources like this one from HubSpot, which contains tons of coding templates and snippets. I put a link to it in the description where you can check it out completely for free. I was skimming through all of the free coding templates and found a ton of useful snippets for things like nav bars, CSS effects, progress bars, and button transitions. It's always helpful for me to utilize pre-built templates to learn how to properly create something and to really quickly get a functional and decent looking website running, especially because I hate working in CSS and I know I'm not alone here. Now, personally, my favorite part of this resource really is all of the CSS effects effects and templates that they have, because it just saves me so much time and gives me something that looks great immediately. Now, this resource and tons of others are provided for free by our video sponsor, HubSpot. So a massive thank you to them for making all of this free, and make sure to check out this resource from the link in the description. So I'm on the computer now, and I just want to give you a quick demo of exactly what it is that we'll be building. Now you can see that we've kind of got a movie search engine here, and what we'll be doing is connecting to a publicly available API that contains all kinds of movie data. This way we can display the most popular movies. That's what it's doing right now. We can favorite the movies by hovering over them and pressing this heart, and then we can search for movies. So if I search for something like the Terminator, for example, you can see that all of these results pop up. So yes, it is fairly simple, but this is going to show you a lot of different features within React, and we're going to go beyond the basics and look at things like using publicly available data, which are almost always doing, connecting some kind of API when you're building a React front end. Now, if I go to the favorites page here, you can see that all of my favorite movies are here, and then I can unfavorite them and remove them from this list if I want to do that. So there you go. That's what we're going to be building. I think this is pretty cool. I know you're going to learn a lot. So now let's hop over to our code editor and start writing this code. So let's get started and learn about React. Now I'm going to start with some important concepts, just going through some of the main pages in the React docs. Then we'll get right into the project and I'll show you how to set everything up. Now, as you probably know, React uses JavaScript, and when you write React code, you're writing kind of a hybrid of HTML and JavaScript. You actually write in a file extension called .jsx, which is a special syntax you'll see in just a minute. Now, React is typically used on the web, but you can use the React Native framework if you want to build applications for mobile, so like iOS, Android, etc. We're not going to cover that in this video. Okay, so the important thing that you need to understand about React is that everything revolves around something called a component. Now, a component is really just a part of your application, like a modular component aspect of the app. Here, it's giving us a great example of a component where we have kind of this little card. We have a thumbnail that might represent like a thumbnail for a video or something. And then we have some information, so like my video, my description, and then we have this like button. Now you can see here, this shows us the code for this video component. And the idea is that we can design these modular components and we can use them multiple times within our application and really separate all of the logic into smaller pieces of code so that we can kind of compartmentalize our application and make it easier to navigate and just write this code. So you'll see that what you need to get used to doing in React is kind of converting the way you think into different components. So even if we look at this web page right here, we can probably identify like this nav bar up here, for example, might be a component. This search button with this kind of pop-up here is probably a component. These different buttons, these could be different components. I know it doesn't make a ton of sense right now, but you're able to design these different kind of small components that you can plug into your application and make things just a lot easier to build. So here you have like the thumbnail component, which we're using. You have this kind of link tag that we've put here, and then you have this like button component, and all of that gets combined into this video component, which is just a JavaScript function that returns what's known as JSX code. Don't worry, I'm going to go into a deep dive. I'm going to explain all of that, but I'm just trying to show you that returns what's known as JSX. Now notice that we have that video component that we made right here, right? And then what we can do is we can use that video component multiple times. We have that multiple videos showing up on our page, where all of the logic for each video is handled within that component. And here we've made a video list component that displays different videos inside of it. So that's what you kind of need to understand, is that we think in components, and everything we build is a component, and these components can have other components inside of them, and by combining these together, you create your web application. Don't worry, we'll break it all down. I'm just showing you a little bit about how this works so you get some context. Now, these components can also manage state, for example. So if this button is pressed or unpressed, they can do all kinds of dynamic and advanced behavior that we're going to look at in just a minute. Okay, so enough of the brief and the theoretical stuff. We want to actually get into the code. The first thing we need to do to start working with React is download Node.js. Now, Node.js is going to allow us to actually create a React project. So go ahead, download Node.js, and make sure this gets added to your system path. So if you're downloading it and it says something like add to path, just check that box so that you're able to use the Node command. So now that we have Node.js installed, what we're going to do is go into some kind of code editor. In my case, I'm going to work in VS Code, but truthfully, you can use anything that you want. Now, from here, what we want to do is open up a new folder. You're going to go to File, Open Folder, just go to your desktop or any place that you want to put this. We're going to go React, movie tutorial or something. You can call it whatever you want. Just make some kind of folder, which is where our project is going to live. Movie tutorial. So now that we've made this folder, I'm just going to close this welcome page here. What we're going to do is run a command that will initialize the React project for us. This is going to use something called Vite. Vite is a lightweight web server that allows us to kind of run our React applications. So what we're going to do is go to our terminal. We're going to make sure we're in the same directory where we want the project to be started. So here we're going to type npm, standing for Node Package Manager, and then create Vite at latest. Okay, I'm going to spell latest correctly. Now, once we do this, it's going to give us a few options here, and we need to first specify the project name. So for the project name, we can just call this front end. Once we call it anything that you want, this will just be the kind of name of the folder that gets created, and then we need to select our framework. Now, we want to use React, so we're going to go with React. There's a lot of options here, and then for the variants that we want to use, we're just going to use JavaScript. Now, there's a bunch of options here. For example, you can use TypeScript as well, but we're going to keep it nice and simple just with one JavaScript. Okay, so now once we do that, it's going to create a new folder for us called front end. This is where our React project will live. So we want to go inside of this directory and start running the set of commands. So we're going to go cd, and we're going to cd into front end, and then from the front end directory, we're going to install the various packages that we need. Now you'll see here that what happens is when we run this command, it creates a bunch of different files for us. And one of the files it creates is this package.json file. Now this package.json file contains all of the dependencies for our application, including the React framework. So you see here it says things like React, React DOM, ESLint. You don't need to understand what all of these are, and really you don't even need to look inside of this file. But what will happen when we run the next command, which is npm install, is we will read the dependencies from our package.json, and we'll simply install them to our local machine. Okay? So we're going to type npm install. I noticed that's happening at the bottom of my terminal, but npm install is the command that you need to run once you're inside of the front end directory. It's going to take a second, it will download and kind of bring all the dependencies in here. And then once we have those dependencies, you'll see that they'll show up in a new folder, and you don't need to look at them from there, but they're just required obviously for the project to run. Okay, so that just finished. Let me just clear my terminal, and you'll see that now we have this node modules folder. Now you don't need to go in this folder or look at it, I'm just kind of quickly showing it to you. This is where all of the code or all of the dependencies for our project live, and anytime we add a new package, it will get added inside of here. Okay, we'll get added in package.json as well as inside of the node module. Now from here, we've got a bunch of files. So let's start going through it, and then we can kind of walk through creating our simple React app and starting to build our project. So we have things like this ESLint configuration. You don't need to worry about that, so just ignore it. We have this index.html. This is where we'll actually inject our React code. So the way this kind of works is we have this div with the ID root, and all of the code that we're about to write, we're pretty much just going to throw that inside of this div. So React will kind of manage the DOM. It will handle all of the HTML being rendered to the page, and the way it does that is we inject the code inside of this div, and then React kind of takes control of that. So you can still write things like meta tags and links, and you can change, for example, the icon and the title of the web page here in this title page. So I could change this to, for example, movie list or something, and then when we run our React app, it will get updated. Now we also have this README file. This is just kind of explaining how to set up the project, so you don't need to worry about that. And then all of the code that we're really going to be concerned with will be inside of this SRC folder, which we'll get to in a second. Okay, we also have this public folder, which has things like the icon under the logo that we potentially would be displaying. Okay, so don't worry too much about this. Really, source is what we need to focus on, and we'll get there in 1 second. But I want to run the React application just to make sure this is working. So once we've installed all of the packages, we can run the command npm run dev. Now this is going to run a development server on our own computer and spin up the React application so we can view it on a specific port. So we're going to hit enter here on npm run dev, and you'll see that it'll show you right here where the React server is running. So you can just copy this into your browser, or you can hit Control-C, Control and just click on the link, which is what I'm doing here. And you'll see that it opens up this kind of Vite plus React template app here, and you can kind of count up if you press on this button. Now we can just leave this running on our screen. I'm not going to show it the entire time, but this actually has something called hot reload, which means anytime I make a change to one of these files, for example, I say movie list 2, if I save this, the server will automatically refresh, and if I go back to my page, I don't need to reload the page to see the change. So here you see it's now updated to movie list 2 for the title of the web page. So that's a really nice feature. You don't need to keep manually refreshing this. It will automatically update anytime you save a change to your React. That's a really nice feature. You don't need to keep manually refreshing this.
Code is a powerful,
automatically update
AI code
anytime you save a change.
supercharges your development workflow right inside VS Code. But unlike other AI tools that just autocomplete what you're writing or create lines and lines of AI slot right inside, Kilo Code is a full development environment that can handle complex tasks across your entire code. At its core, Kilo Code uses specialized modes to adapt to different development.
Alright, so that's all great, but I'm just going to close the terminal for now. I'm going to leave the server running so I don't need to rerun this again, but I'm just closing it. Alright, so that's all great. So now I'm going to close this index.html, and we're going to start looking at some of the files that it's given us here inside of this template. Now notice right away that they end in this .jsx extension. So whenever you're writing React code, something like a React component, which again we'll look at in a minute, you want to make sure that it ends in .jsx, not .js, because if you just do normal JavaScript, you're going to get an issue if you write kind of specific code. Again, you're going to see it in a minute. I'm sorry for putting everything forward. Anyways, you can see here we have this main.jsx file. Now this is where your React application begins, and you can see that what we're doing inside of this file is we're importing a few dependencies, we're looking for the root div inside of our HTML file, and we're simply rendering our React applications inside of it. So we have this component called app. This is where all of our kind of React code lives, so we're going to start the application from and render everything that we need. And we just take that and we just throw it inside of the React code. So that's kind of how this begins and how the code actually gets injected into the web page. Now if we go to app.jsx, this is where we can actually start writing code. So if you look here, you might see some code that looks familiar. You have kind of some JavaScript looking code up here. We have a JavaScript function, which is actually what a component is in React. And we have this JSX is a combination of JavaScript and HTML. And you'll see that we have some things that we're doing is we're importing this app.css file, and we're just rendering an empty div, which just means that's what we're going to put on the web page. This is our entire React application as of now. Okay, so now that we've got a clear slate here, I want to talk to you about JSX, so the syntax that's being returned from these components, show you a few things that we can do here and how it differs from normal HTML. We're going to get into components, we're going to start building stuff out, but kind of baby steps at least for right now. Okay, so right here we have what's known as a component. A component is really just any function in JavaScript that returns some kind of JSX code. So it really just returns something that looks like HTML. That's the way to React application. So components will always start with a capital letter. So in this case, we have function app. This is the name of our component. And from the component, we're returning this div. Okay, very simple. We can return really anything that we want, so long as it's JSX code. Now, the criteria for something being JSX is that it needs to have some kind of parent element. So in this case, we're just returning some div. This is the only thing that we have. But I couldn't, for example, go here and try to return another div that's at the same level. Notice that even though we have the braces here, we're getting an error, and the reason for that is whenever we return something, it needs to to have just one parent element, one kind of root element being returned, and then it can have anything we want in this JS section, okay? So we have a div, and for now we're just going to return a very simple paragraph, and we can just say something like hello world, and if we save this, you'll see that in the middle of our screen, we now get hello world. Okay, so that's the first thing to understand with JSX, is we're returning it from a component one JSX will be returning, we can't return multiple times at the same paragraph. However, what if we wanted to have maybe another div? Maybe we're going to set up some kind of flex box container or something like that. We don't necessarily want to have some kind of JSX. Well, if that's the case, what we can do is return something called a fragment, okay? Now, a fragment is really just kind of a placeholder for that parent element. This is what a fragment looks like right here. It's simply just an HTML. And it solves that problem where maybe we wanted two divs like this, but we didn't necessarily want a div parent. In this case, we can just return a fragment, and just then it grabs these different elements, so that we have fragment looks like right here. Okay, hopefully that's making sense. Now, what I want to do is writing this on I probably just want to wrap this in reusable code, and then hit render twice. Now, I know this example isn't going to sound really sense, just because I need to go through the basics so that we can get into the actual project. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to make a new kind of dummy component to show you how it runs. So if we want to make a component, we just give a function a name, say the capital letter, in this case, text, and then we do our set of braces. And from here, all we have to do is just return something. So I'm simply just going to return a div that has hello world inside. Okay, let me just format this so that's the video. Okay, great. So we've just defined a component, and now if we want to use the component, we use it just like we use any normal kind of HTML element. So what I can do is I can simply write the name of the component, and then I can just end the tag. Text, and then slash like this. I can save, and when I reload, notice that my text is here. So what I can actually do is I can put this component 2 times, and now I'm just showing 2 text components inside of this. Okay, so you can see how this can get really useful really fast, because we can make different components for all the different parts of our user interface, and then we can combine them together, and it makes it really easy for us to understand what's going on, because I can just read the names of the components in this root component, for example, and I can kind of drill into the exact area that I'm looking at, rather than having to run them in HTML, all in a single file. Okay, so this is the basic, very basic on a component. We define something with a capital letter, we return some JSX code, and then we're displaying that in 2 times. Now, sometimes with our components, we want to actually display something unique. So maybe we want to have some kind of parameter, some property that we pass to the component that customizes the behavior. In this case, we have a text component, and for the text component, maybe we want to change the color, or we want to change the text that's actually being displayed. So what we can do is we can add what's known as a prop. Okay, now prop stands for property. And the way this works is I can put a set of curly braces here inside of my component, and I can define different props that I want to accept. So I can say something like text. Now when I do this, this indicates that I'm able to pass this text keyword to my component, and I can dynamically kind of use the value that's passed in, just like we do in a normal function. So now, rather than rendering hello world, I can simply render some text. And just to make it not super confusing, let's just change this to something like, I don't know, display or something, just so that it's not the same word when I'm explaining. Okay, so now what I can do is I can go here, and I can say display is equal to something like hello, and I can say display is equal to, you know, what's up. And now, when I save this, notice that the first text component shows what's up, and the second text component shows hello, because we're dynamically displaying what we're passing as the display prop. Now we can pass as many props as we want. just like we would in normal JavaScript or normal HTML, when we click the button, we want to be able to respond to that event. So we can actually add a JavaScript function here, which will be triggered when we click this button. So to do that, we can just make a function inside of our function here. So I can say something like function on, like, or on favorite click or something, call it whatever you want, doesn't really matter. And now I can simply pass this function name to my onClick, and now this function will get called anytime this button gets pressed. Okay, and then anything inside of this function will run. So for now, we can just do an alert and say clicked, just so that we know it's working. Okay, now inside of the button, we probably want to have some text. So I'm just going to copy in this kind of heart text right here. You can put anything you want. You can find this by just looking up like heart icon online, or you can just copy the code. I'm going to leave a link to the GitHub in the description. But anyways, we're just going to put a little bit of a white heart. Okay. So now we've got part of our poster, part of our movie, but I want to go outside of my movie poster, inside of my movie card, and I want to write a little bit more. We're almost done, but I want to write a bit more for my component. So I'm going to say div like function class name is equal to, and this is going to be the movie info. And inside of here, I'm just going to add some information about my movie. So I'm going to have an H3, and I'm going to embed inside here my movie.title. Now notice, because I want to use a variable here coming from my prop, I actually use the brace, okay? So when I do the brace, it means I'm treating whatever's inside of the braces as a variable. If I didn't have the braces, then we would just render the string movie title, which is not what we want. We want to actually get the movie title from our prop or anything we want. And then lastly, we're going to have a paragraph tag. We're going to say movie dot release underscore date. And then for now, we'll just leave it at that. Okay, so this is our movie card. We've just defined it. And now if we want to start using it, we need to export it from this file. So whenever we want to access something from another file in JavaScript here, we're going to export this. So to do that, at the bottom of our code, we're going to type export default, and then the name of our component, which is default. Okay, so now this will be available as a default import. I'll show you how that works in just 1 second. We also could just denote the function as exported up here, but if we do that, we need to import specifically this function name, but it's not a default export, it's a date export, and then we're going to look at that in a second. Okay, anyways, we've got this component, we want to find it, we want to see it on the screen, we want to start messing with it. So to do that, we're going to go into app.js, and we're going to import the code that we just wrote, and then we're going to start rendering some movies as a part of our code. So to do that, we're going to go up to the top of our program, and we're going to say import instead of movie cards. You can call this anything you want. From dot slash components slash and then the name of our file, and this is going to be export. Okay. Now because we added this export default, we can simply write the import like this. If we didn't have a default export, and I specified an export like this, export, I would need to actually surround this export. So this is called a named export, and this needs to be default export. Sorry, let's go back to the where we had the export default there. Okay, so it's just common to use default export for this specified again. Alright, so now we imported this, and what we want to do is display our movie. So to display our movie, we can say, okay, we want to display a movie card, but in order for this to work, we need to pass the prop, which is movie. Okay, so we're going to say movie is equal to, and I'm going to put an object here. Now to put an object, I can put another set of braces, because the first set of braces defines that we're denoting a variable, and then the second set of braces will be the object that we're going to pass. Now for our movie, we can have some title, so we can say this is going to be Tim's film or something, and then we can have the release date. I forget what we called it, so we can go check it out. Okay, so it's release underscore date. Okay, so let's fix that. And then this can be equal to 2024. And then what else do we have here? We have the URL, and for now the URL I'm just not going to put it in there. Okay. So notice when I do this, now we get our movie. It looks a little bit weird because it's got this kind of button here. When we click on it, it says click. And we've got Tim's film and 2023. Now the beautiful thing about these components is that I can now display them multiple times. So I can now have this, and I can say this is, Joe's film in 2020, and now I get the exact same component showing up, except with these new dynamic values. Awesome. So that's kind of the first part here with our components. We define a component, we can dynamically render some information. I want to show you some more cool things that we can do with rendering and displaying stuff in the screen before we get into anything too complicated. So a very common thing we're going to see when you're working with React is something known as conditional rendering. And this is some code you can write where you can essentially render one out and the other based on conditions. So let's say I have some variable here and I have movie number. Okay? And maybe this is equal to movie number. First of all, this is perfectly valid. You can just write any JavaScript code you normally would before the return statement, and you can have as much logic as you want happening inside of the component before you eventually get to this return. Anyways, it's possible that we might only want to display one of these movies, and we want to display maybe this first one if the movie number is 1, and the second one if the movie number is 2. Now, in order to do that, we could just write if statements up here. We can say if, movie number or something like this is equal to 1, then we're going to return, the movie card. But the issue with that is that if we have a more complex user interface, we probably want this condition to apply just inside of here. Like we can return other parts of our user interface as well. So what I can do is I can write something like this. I can say movie number is equal to 1 question mark. Okay, and then I'm going to copy this, and then I can put a colon. I can put my other component. I can close the bracket. Let me just format this so you guys can read it. And what we've just done is set up a conditional render. Now, what I'm doing is I'm checking some conditions. So I'm saying, okay, movie number is equal to 1. So if movie number is equal to 1, then whatever I put after the question mark, which is this component, will get rendered on the screen. Otherwise, which comes after a colon, will display this component. Okay, so we're just conditionally rendering it based on this. Now, if I change this to say movie number equals to 2, you see now that it changes to Joe's film. Okay, if I change it to 1, it changes back to Tim's film. So that's one way that we can conditionally render. Now, another way, just get rid of this here, is to do something like this. So I can say movie number is equal to 1, and then I can put some component. Now, when I do this, it works a little bit differently. I don't have an if else. I just have, okay, if this thing here is true on the left side, then go ahead and display this. Okay, it has to do with short circuiting in JavaScript, if you know what that is, but this is something that's perfectly valid, so we can say, okay, movie number is equal to 1. If that's the case, go ahead and display this. That's pretty much it. Okay, so that's what you need to know about conditional rendering. You're going to see that quite a bit inside of your JSX code, where certain things will be displayed only if some conditions are correct. Alright, so all of that is great. We're going to get into a slightly more complex example here. So I'm just going to remove everything inside of app. I'm actually going to make a new folder here inside of SRC called pages. And the reason for this is that these components are typically things that will be displayed on the page and make up parts of our user interface. But we also can have unique pages that we can navigate between using some kind of page work, which we're going to look at in 1 second. So what I want to do for now is I want to make a home page for our site. So I'm going to say, I don't have to go ahead and display. I just have, okay, it has to do with short circuiting in JavaScript. That is, go ahead. This is something that's perfectly valid. It has to do with short circuiting in JavaScript. Go ahead. This is something that's perfectly valid. So we can say, okay, that's pretty much everything. So that's what you need to know about conditional rendering. You're going to see that quite a bit. That's pretty much it. So that's where inside of here, this is where I'm going to display kind of a list of all of the movies. And then I'm going to have another page. We'll just make it while we're here. And this is going to be favorites, okay, .jsx. Now the favorites will display all of our favorites, and the home will just display kind of the ability to search for movies and to, well, favorite them. Okay, we've still got our movie card, which we can use later on, and we will customize this a bit in a second. But for now, I want to work on this home page. Okay, so let's work on a home page. And on the home page, I'm going to display multiple different movies, and I'm going to have kind of a search form set up so that users can search for movies. All right, so to start here, we're going to make a component again, and we're going to call this home. And this component is just going to contain pretty much the entire user interface for the home page, okay? So inside of home, we're just going to return some JSX, and then we're going to add some logic to this later on. So inside of here, we're just going to return a div, okay? And the div is going to have a class name, and this is just going to be equal to home. Now at the top, I'm going to make a variable inside of my function called movies. And the idea is I'm going to have an array here that contains some different movies, and rather than rendering all the movies, or have 10 movies or 100 movies or 200 movies, doesn't matter, I will just display a movie card for every single one of those, okay? So in order to do that, we're just going to define some movies here, so we can have maybe an ID for the movie, and say this is ID 1, we can have the title, and we're just going to go, this is, John Wick or something. We'll have the release underscore date. I don't know when this was released, 2020 or something. Okay, and let's just copy this and change some of these fields, and let's add a few different movies, just so that we have some unique values that we can look at, okay? So let's go with something like Terminator, okay, I don't know when it was released. Okay, let's go with The Matrix. Okay, same thing. This is probably before I was born. You know what, 3 movies for now is fine. Okay, so we've got 3 movies, and the idea is, what I probably want to do here is display all of these movies, maybe in some kind of row or something. So how can I do that? Well, I can use something in JavaScript or in JSX here called .map to dynamically render typically an array of values. So the way it works is something like this. I'm just going to make a div to put these inside of. I'm going to say the class name is equal to, and we're going to go with the movies-grid, because we're going to have a grid of movies. And I'm going to start by kind of writing these braces because I'm about to define an expression in JavaScript. So I'm going to say movies.map. Okay. Now what I can do is I can write movie. So this is the parameter that I'm accepting. And then I can put an arrow function. And what comes after the arrow function is the component that I want to return for every single instance of my movie. So let me just write it out and then I'll kind of walk you through it. So we're going to say that we want to return a movie card. Now if we want to use the movie card component, which is the one that we defined here, we need to import it. So we're going to say import movie card. Okay, from, and we're going to say .. and then this is going to be components / and then use card. Now we use the .. because we need to go back one level because we're currently in the pages directory to the source directory. Then we need to look inside of components and then look inside of our movie card. Okay, so now we've imported that. So now I can use my movie card. And what I'm going to do is just pass to the movie card my movie. So I'm going to say that my movie is equal to the movie that I have right here. And also, what I need to do is add something called a key, which I will discuss in 1 second. Okay, so we're going to say key is equal to movie.id. Well, I can use something, and let me just format this so that we can read it a little easier. Map. Okay, so what we're doing here is we're using the .map function, which is going to iterate over all of the values inside of our array. For every single value, it's going to take it and pass it to this function. This function then needs to return some JSX code. In this case, we're returning a component. And this now means we're going to display this component for every single movie. So it's just going to kind of put them on the screen. We don't have any styling right now, but it will just make them accepting. Okay. And then I can now whenever you do this, you need to add a .key property to the component you're returning. The reason for that is that React needs to know which component to update based on the interactions that happen with the web page. So we need to mark every single one of these components with a unique identifier so that React can kind of handle all of the state updates that it typically does. I don't want to get into all the complexity right now, but what you need to remember is that if you're dynamically rendering kind of multiple things like we're doing with .map, you need to add this key property, even if I haven't added it here. So I haven't added it as a prop, it's just something that I add to the component so that React can identify this component compared to the other ones that we're rendering. Okay? Now, we want to see this, so what I'm going to do is say export default the home page. I'm going to show you how we route between the pages in just a minute. But for now, to keep things simple, I'm going to go to app.jsx, which remember is the main component that we're rendering on our website. We're going to import the home components. We're going to say import home, and let me just from, and then this is going to be pages or /pages /home. Okay, and then we're just going to display the home component. Okay, now the home component doesn't take any props, and notice that as soon as I display the home component, we now get all of our movies popping up on the screen because we dynamically rendered them using .maps. Alright, so this is fine, but I want to add some more functionality to this home page. I don't just want to display the movies, I also want to display some